From the moment Shedeur Sanders stepped onto an NFL field, something unexpected started happening. The same people who spent months doubting him, questioning his maturity, his leadership, even his place in the locker room, suddenly began shifting their tone. And they didn't do it quietly. They did it because the truth finally hit them in the face. Every snap, every drive, every throw forced the narrative to collapse in real time. Before his first starts, the conversation around Shedeur was filled with doubt. Certain analysts insisted he wasn't ready. Some local reporters pushed stories about him not being liked, not being prepared, not being engaged. But the moment the kid actually played, everything those critics claimed to know fell apart. On the field, he wasn't hesitant or overwhelmed. He wasn't timid or unsure. He was poised, aggressive, and confident. Everything a rookie quarterback isn't supposed to be. And the reaction from the league was instant. Teammates praised his leadership. Opponents noticed his calm under pressure. Media members who once dismissed him were suddenly talking about elite accuracy, NFL-level command, and a field general in the making. The flip was so dramatic that fans began asking the obvious question: if he looked this good now, why did so many people push so hard to paint a different picture earlier? That question is where the story really begins. Because the more Shedeur played, the more the old narratives cracked, and the more uncomfortable truths began surfacing about how he was covered, evaluated, and discussed behind the scenes. The turnaround wasn't luck, it wasn't hype, it was exposure. Shedeur didn't change, the narrative did, and it changed because it had to. And once the media started scrambling to explain themselves, everything they tried to hide came rushing back into the spotlight. The moment Shedeur Sanders finally stepped onto the field and started showcasing what he could really do, the entire tone around him shifted, and not gradually. It flipped almost overnight. Media personalities who had spent months throwing doubt on his name suddenly began speaking with a level of respect they hadn't shown before. And that shift wasn't born out of generosity. It came from necessity. Once the film was out there, once the throws were undeniable, the old talking points simply couldn't survive. ESPN's Big Rizzo was one of the first to break the silence. Not only did he praise Shedeur's poise, accuracy, and command, he went as far as saying the Browns should have started him from the very beginning of the season. That was a stunning reversal from someone who once echoed the skepticism coming from inside the building. Now he was calling Shedeur a field general, highlighting his leadership qualities, and insisting that everything the kid needed was that. Game reps he should have been getting months earlier. And Rizzo wasn't alone. More analysts began acknowledging what fans had been screaming from the start. Shedeur didn't need protection from difficult moments. He needed opportunities. They saw how he remained calm behind a shaky offensive line, how he processed pressure, and how he attacked downfield with confidence most rookies don't develop for years. Suddenly, the same voices that pushed fear-based narratives were praising his composure and maturity. But the most telling part wasn't the praise. It was the excuses. Every analyst who flipped sides tried to justify why they misread him. They blamed limited camp reps. They blamed misinformation. They blamed the Browns for controlling the narrative. Some even claimed they were just repeating what they were told. That's where the cracks really began to show. When analysts start admitting they relied on second-hand assumptions instead of first-hand evaluation, it exposes how fragile the original narrative truly was. The truth is simple. Shedeur didn't surprise the people who actually watched him closely. He surprised the people who underestimated him. And while the media was busy scrambling to rewrite its stance, something even more important was happening inside the locker room. Something that made it clear the players knew the truth long before the reporters did, because what his teammates said next revealed a side of Shedeur the public had never heard. Once the voices inside the locker room made it clear who Shedeur really was, The next wave of truth came from a place even harder to deny: the numbers. Not opinions, not speculation, not selective leaks or media spin. Actual performance data that showed exactly what he was doing every time he stepped onto the field. And when those numbers began circulating, the entire narrative shifted from questionable to unbelievable. It started with what Shedeur accomplished in just his third career start. Only 2 quarterbacks in NFL history have ever thrown for exactly 364 yards in that moment of their career: Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders. Anytime your name sits next to Brady on a statistical list, people pay attention. But this wasn't some inflated stat line or empty yardage game. It was production under real pressure, behind an offensive line missing 3 starters, against defenders who knew he'd be forced to make quick decisions on almost every drop back. Then came the league-wide comparisons. In Week 14, only Dak Prescott threw for more yards than Shedeur. Everyone else, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, fell behind him. And these aren't rookies. These are established franchise quarterbacks operating behind much cleaner protection than what Shedeur had to work with. The fact that he kept pace with them, and in some cases exceeded them, wasn't just impressive. It was undeniable evidence of a quarterback who wasn't supposed to be this good yet. The pressure numbers exposed even more. Shedeur faced the highest pressure rate of any quarterback in the entire NFL this season. 63% of his snaps came with defenders collapsing the pocket. Most quarterbacks crumble under that kind of constant heat. Shedeur didn't just survive it, he made some of his best throws because of it. That's why analysts who relied on eye tests and film study began flipping their takes faster than the box scores updated. Every metric told the same story: completion percentage, explosive play rate, deep accuracy, efficiency. When the ball was in his hands, the offense moved in ways it simply didn't with other quarterbacks. And suddenly, all the excuses about weak opponents or lucky drives evaporated, because the truth was staring everyone in the face. The numbers matched the leadership matched the work ethic, and the work ethic matched exactly what teammates had been saying from day one. But the stats weren't done rewriting the narrative. The deeper analytics, the ones critics used to argue against him, painted an even more revealing picture. If the box score made people raise an eyebrow, the advanced analytics made them sit up straight. These weren't the numbers casual fans look at. These were the metrics analysts rely on to separate hype from truth. And once those deeper stats hit the internet, even the harshest critics had to admit that the narrative they'd been pushing didn't match reality. One of the first metrics to expose the truth was EPA per play, a favorite among the analytics crowd. It measures how much value a quarterback adds on each snap. Critics expected Shedeur to sit near the bottom of the chart, but instead he landed right in the middle, above several established veterans. If he were truly struggling, he'd be buried near the bottom with quarterbacks like Bo Nix or Davis Mills. Instead, he held his own against names like Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, and Justin Herbert. You can't fake efficiency. You either move the offense or you don't. Then the PFF breakdown dropped, and it revealed even more. Shedeur earned a 76.2 overall grade, with strong passing, running, and decision-making scores. He had 3 big-time throws, some of the highest in his rookie class, and only 2 turnover-worthy plays, numbers far better than the media had been suggesting. His adjusted completion percentage, a metric that removes drops and throwaways, showed accuracy beyond typical rookie levels. Even with 30 pressures in one game, he took only 2 sacks, proving his pocket awareness wasn't just good, it was advanced. These weren't cherry-picked stats. These were the same metrics critics used to tear down other rookies. But when those same formulas favored Shedeur, suddenly the excuses started flowing. Suddenly, the analysts who trusted nerd stats were telling fans to ignore them. Convenient, right? But the film didn't lie either. Coaches reviewing tape saw a quarterback who attacked every layer of the field. Over the middle, outside the numbers, deep down the sideline. They saw someone who reset quickly after mistakes. Someone who kept his eyes downfield even as the pocket collapsed. They saw traits that translate, not flashes that fade. And all of this led to a moment nobody expected. Media members who had once blasted him were now backpedaling, claiming they had been misled. Or worse, that they simply believed what the Browns told them. And that admission cracked open the door to a much bigger revelation. One that exposed exactly how the early narrative around Shedeur took shape. As the analytics continued piling up, something even more shocking happened. Something that revealed just how manufactured the early narrative around Shedeur might have been. A few Cleveland journalists, the same ones who spent months painting him as unprepared or unfit, suddenly admitted they weren't basing their criticism on first-hand evaluation at all. Instead, they were repeating what they'd been told behind the scenes. The revelation came during a segment with Jay Pedelin and Nick Wilson, and it spread fast. Jay admitted he had simply taken what the Browns told him about Shedeur's development. He repeated claims about the rookie's readiness, echoed doubts about his ability to process the playbook, and even suggested Shedeur couldn't do anything in practice, all because, as he put it, he trusted the information the organization fed him. Hearing that come from someone who once presented these opinions as his own was a moment fans won't forget anytime soon. Nick Wilson reacted with the same disbelief viewers felt. He said what everyone had been thinking. How could so many local voices push the same negative story without actually checking whether it was true? How could media members with access to practices and film rely solely on secondhand whispers? And most importantly, why was that narrative being pushed in the first place? Rumors began circulating that some insiders were fed selective details to lower public expectations for Shedeur. While none of this has been confirmed, the timing makes it hard to ignore. Once Shedeur started producing, once the film contradicted the early narratives, suddenly, people who claimed he wasn't ready were backpedaling, fast. And then came the most heated reaction. Analysts turning their focus toward Anthony Lima, a host who doubled down on the early negative stories and openly mocked anyone who disagreed. Critics argued he wasn't just misinformed. He was dismissive, defensive, and unwilling to admit the narrative had shifted. The fact that Lima dug in deeper as others stepped back made the situation even more volatile. But beneath all the drama and finger-pointing was one unavoidable truth. The negative storyline surrounding Shedeur wasn't based on performance. It was built on assumptions, misinformation, and the willingness of some media members to repeat whatever fit the story they wanted to tell. And once that foundation collapsed, the next stage of Shedeur's rise became impossible to deny. Because what happened next showed just how completely the old narrative had fallen apart. By the time the admissions from local journalists hit the airwaves, the storyline surrounding Shedeur Sanders wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing in full view of the entire NFL world. Everything critics claimed to know about him was being disproven, one game, one drive, one throw at a time. And the speed at which the old narrative fell apart was almost poetic. The moment Shedeur stepped into real game action, the assumptions evaporated. Those claims that he couldn't process the field? Gone the second he started hitting tight window throws with anticipation most rookies don't develop for years. The idea that he was, mentally, that disappeared once he stood tall behind a banged-up offensive line and still delivered NFL-level accuracy under the highest pressure rate in the league. Even the rumors about him not being respected in the locker room crumbled instantly when teammates publicly praised his leadership, consistency, and approach to the game. What stunned people most wasn't that Shedeur played well, It was that he played well in the exact areas the critics insisted he would fail. Instead of looking overwhelmed, he looked composed. Instead of folding after mistakes, he reset and attacked the next play. Instead of shrinking under pressure, he made some of his best throws with defenders in his face. This wasn't a rookie hanging on. This was a quarterback proving he belonged. And that's when the real backtracking began. Analysts who once dismissed him started using words like impressive, poised, and legit. The same shows that pushed doubt-heavy narratives suddenly shifted their tone, praising his vision, his arm talent, and his ability to elevate the entire offense. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't gradual. It was a full-scale reversal, driven by the reality they could no longer deny. Even the harshest critics began softening their stance. They didn't want to say they were wrong. They wanted to say Shedeur surprised them. But the evidence says something different. He didn't surprise the people who actually evaluated him honestly. He only surprised the voices who didn't look closely until the truth forced them to. And once the narrative collapsed, the Browns organization found itself in a position it didn't expect, because now fans wanted answers about what this meant moving forward. And that's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Once the old narrative crumbled, the Browns were left standing in a spotlight they didn't expect, and probably didn't want, because now the conversation wasn't just about Shedeur proving people wrong. It became about what his rise exposed inside the organization, and what Cleveland has to confront moving forward. For months, the team seemed convinced they had time. Time to slow play his development. Time to hide behind veterans. Time to shape a storyline about patience and readiness. But the moment Shedeur showed what he was capable of, that entire timeline went out the window. The first issue is trust. Fans now know that some of the early criticism didn't come from honest evaluation. It came from misinformation repeated without question. When supporters realize the stories they were fed weren't accurate, they start questioning everything. Depth chart decisions, injury reports, coaching strategies, nothing escapes scrutiny. And that's exactly where the Browns find themselves. This isn't just a quarterback discussion anymore. It's about whether the organization has been transparent at all. Then there's the internal pressure. If Shedeur keeps playing at this level, the coaching staff must confront the possibility that they underestimated him from the beginning. That creates awkward questions. Why wasn't he prioritized earlier? Why were veterans given opportunities he had already earned? And perhaps the biggest one, how do you justify going back to anyone else now? Even people inside the building seem to understand that the old plan is gone. The offense looks more alive with Shedeur at the controls, and teammates openly acknowledge how quickly he's taken ownership of the huddle. But the long-term implications go even deeper. A rookie who commands this much respect this early forces the franchise to rethink everything, from off-season moves to contract strategies to the overall direction of the team. You can't treat a quarterback like a developmental project once he starts producing like a franchise cornerstone. And based on how analysts, teammates, and national voices are talking, that's exactly the category Shedeur is drifting toward. Now, the Browns face a future where their decisions will be watched more closely than ever. Every move will be weighed against what fans have already seen with their own eyes. The margin for political decisions or hidden agendas is shrinking fast. And if the Browns thought the spotlight was bright now, the next chapter will make it even harder for them to hide. Looking back at everything that unfolded, the rise of Shedeur Sanders inside the Cleveland Browns organization has become one of the most revealing storylines in recent NFL memory. Not because he shocked the league with a single breakout performance, but because his success exposed how fragile and misleading early narratives can be, and how quickly they can fall apart when the truth finally gets a chance to breathe. For months, fans were told a version of events that never aligned with the evidence. They were told he wasn't ready. They were told veterans gave the team the best chance. They were told he lacked chemistry, lacked experience, or lacked something that somehow couldn't be measured. But the moment he stepped onto the field, those statements dissolved. His poise under pressure, his command of the offense, and his ability to rise above chaos didn't just contradict the rumors, they erased them entirely. Yet the most revealing part wasn't what Shedeur did. It was how quickly people scrambled to rewrite their stance once the film and stats made it impossible to deny his talent. Analysts, who once questioned him, suddenly praised his accuracy. Commentators who repeated negative whispers began blaming those whispers on the organization. Even critics, who seemed determined to downplay him, were forced to acknowledge the leadership and maturity he brought to every snap. And that's where the story becomes bigger than one player. What happened with Shedeur shines a light on how narratives are formed in the NFL, how media repetition can shape public perception, how organizations can control what information gets out, and how easily a young player can become a target before he ever gets a fair shot. But it also proves something stronger. Performance always breaks through. Now the Browns must face the future with a reality they can't sidestep. Shedeur isn't a developmental project. He's not a backup who needs protecting. He's a legitimate quarterback who commands the field, earns respect, and forces the organization to rethink everything it believed about its long-term plan. And if this much came out simply because he got the opportunity to play, it raises a much bigger question, one the Browns may not be ready to answer. If the truth surfaced this quickly, what else has been hiding beneath the surface all along? The next chapter is coming, and Cleveland won't be able to control the narrative this time. When you step back and look at everything that unfolded around Shedeur Sanders this season, it becomes clear that this story was never just about one performance, one start, or even one rookie proving he belongs in the NFL. It was about the quiet machinery behind the scenes, the narratives shaped without evidence, the assumptions repeated without question, and the way a player's reputation can be built or destroyed before he ever gets the chance to write his own chapter. And in Shedeur's case, the moment he finally touched the field, the truth began rewriting that chapter for everyone to see. For months, the loudest voices tried to convince fans he wasn't ready. They pushed the idea that he lacked leadership, that he wasn't respected in the locker room, that he couldn't process an NFL defense. Yet with every throw he made, those claims crumbled. The teammates who actually saw him work spoke about his maturity and drive. The analytics that critics rely on told a story of efficiency and poise, and the preparation shown on film revealed a quarterback who wasn't surviving in chaos. He was thriving in it. What makes this story powerful is how quickly the narrative flipped. The same media members who dismissed him suddenly praised his accuracy and command. Analysts who repeated whispers from inside the building began blaming those whispers for misleading them. Some even admitted they never evaluated him independently. And each time Shedeur stepped on the field, the gap between the truth and the narrative became impossible to hide. But this goes beyond one rookie winning a job. It exposes how information moves inside NFL circles, how storylines can be distorted, how agendas can shift evaluations, and how easily fans can be steered in the wrong direction. Most rookies never get the chance to challenge that system. Shedeur did, and the moment he did, everything around him snapped into focus. Now the Browns face a new reality. They can no longer rely on controlled narratives or selective leaks. The film is out. The data is out. The players have spoken, and the fan base has watched it unfold with their own eyes, which leaves one final question hanging over Cleveland. One that's bigger than the stats, bigger than the media flip-flops, and bigger than the storyline they tried to sell. If this much truth came out the moment Shedeur played, what else might still be hidden beneath the surface? Whatever the answer is, the next chapter won't be as easy to control.